Well, the Olympics are going on this week in Rio, and as I wrote this sermon on Friday, the track and field competitions were on television, at least to the extent that you could say any part of the Olympics was on NBC. See, because NBC has not been doing a good job of coverage? Nothing? Okay. In any case, track and field is supposed to have center stage this week. So, perhaps it's appropriate that we talk about running metaphors this morning. Now, don't ask me about actual track and field because I don't know a thing about it. But we'll talk about running metaphors. I read a pastor the other day say that he got a lot happier with his career when he figured out that ministry is not a solo shot like the 400 meters or even a marathon. As he said, ministry is more like a relay race. You take the baton from the guy before you, you do what you can, and then you pass it off to the guy after you. It's the team that wins, not any one individual. I like that metaphor. I like that a lot. You try not to fumble the handoff in either direction, and in the middle, you do the best that you can. If you think about it, this applies not just to pastors and their ministries, but the life of the church in general. St. Paul's has been here for 170 years. Right? Did I get that right? I got to check. Sign over here. Right? 170? In many ways, we're just trying to keep going what we have been handed, and to hand it off to those who come after us. The anonymous author of the letter to the Hebrews, we don't know his name, he had the same idea. He talks about all those who have been stages in the relay before us. There were the Israelites who followed Moses out of Egypt, and the armies who blew the horns to drop the walls of Jericho. Kind of oddly, he mentions Rahab the prostitute who helped bring down Jericho, even though she herself was not an Israelite. And then, because the time is getting short, the author just starts rattling off names and brief summaries of stories that the listeners surely understand. There's Daniel, who shuts the mouths of lions. And we heard that story, didn't we, Dustin? Yeah. And there's Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, who quenched the raging fire of the furnace into which they have been cast. We don't often think about the resurrection before Christ on Easter morning, but the prophets Elijah and Elisha are said to have raised sons from the dead and returned them to their mothers. These, as I say, are all people who have come before us in the faith. They're examples of faith and perseverance. Some, the author reminds us, won't be joining us on the medal stand. Some were tortured and was put on the rack. Some were mocked and flogged, some thrown in jail, stoned to death, sawn in two, executed at sword point. Some were impoverished or otherwise oppressed. The author implies that he could just go on and on with this list if he really wanted to. But you get the point. It might seem difficult to us now, but it hasn't exactly been easy in the past either. And in fact, those who came before us had it much worse. Though their faith was strong, they didn't get a medal at all. It's only after Christ that humanity becomes eligible for big prizes. All that sacrifice. And they've just been setting the stage for us to shine, to be perfected. Judges give us a 10 out of 10. So we should look to those examples of those who have come before us as we try to gird ourselves for the struggles of today. If they can suffer worse for less reward, then we can keep going. Let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, as the author has it. While we run, we have this cheering section. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, as the text says, and it's actually an image of people in a stadium watching athletes at work. The people who have run the race before us are now our greatest fans. And we have another example as well. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He just had a great lap going around, and the author asks us to watch it and see how it's done. If we're going to run this here race, of course, we need to get rid of the things that slow us down. You don't run a race carrying weights or tying your legs together. So we need to get rid of the encumbrances and the sin that is so happy to hang on to us. My wife, who is perhaps happiest in her life when she is organizing something, sometimes talks about cumber, right? Which is all that clutter and CRAP that just sort of builds up when you're not paying attention. We have this wonderful marriage where my wife likes everything organized and tidy, and I like to leave little piles around the house. This drives her back. She says messes cause anxiety. And we all know that having too much stuff can be a burden. As Jesus teaches, having too much stuff keeps us away from who we should be and what we should be doing. All of that's real, and but perhaps a sermon for another time. The sin interests me more this morning. And again, I'm not talking about sin in the sense that we usually do, in terms of sex or divorce or drinking too much or using drugs or failing to give God glory in our entire lives. For the author of Hebrews, sin is as much falling away from faith in Jesus as anything. For me, though, it's something entirely different. I've been reading in recent weeks about what happened when Christianity first encountered native religions, Native American ways of understanding the world during the conquest of Mexico. What did I tell you? Your pastor's a geek, right? Remember, I read these things. The short version is that the Christians attempted to destroy everything that wasn't Spanish, to tell the native Mexicans that they were bad and full of sin. Many of those natives internalized that message and came to believe that they must hate themselves in order to become Christians. The theologian Virgil Elizondo says against this, conversion, which is giving up the ways of sin, conversion to the way of Jesus is beautiful. It is not a call to self-destruction. Conversion certainly means a dying to sin, but it does not mean a total destruction of one's way of life. In fact, the worst sin of all is the failure to recognize our own inner and outer dignity, beauty, and inner worth. I wish I should have that made up as a sign put up somewhere in the church. The worst sin of all is the failure to recognize our own inner and outer dignity, beauty, and worth. This is what it means to lay aside every weight and sin, to leave behind all those ways that we have to damage ourselves. Dignity, beauty, our worth. Those things that cause that kind of damage, those are the sins that are worth talking about. We set those sins aside in order to live like Jesus, in the beautiful way of Jesus, for the sake of the joy that is set before us, disregarding the ways of death and shame. Elizondo says that true faith comes to us in flowers and song, in the joy-filled opening of ourselves to God. We could, don't get me wrong here, we could stand and work on the song part of it, couldn't we? To be honest. With due respect, as our English friends say. Maybe we should import some of those Mexican worship bands I've seen with trumpets and guitars and tubas. I'll leave it to you to decide the state of our flowers. But where I see the joy most clearly in our life together is the happy chatter before and after worship. You are happiest, you are most joyful in relationship with one another. And I suspect that more than a few of you have felt your inner and outer dignity, beauty, and inner worth restored in those conversations. You feel good about yourself after you've talked to your friends at church. You feel embraced in this community, accepted for who you are without judgment. We should do more along those lines in order to continue to run the race. I see joy set before our children as well. You know, when they come to talk to me, when they go downstairs to learn and play, when they sing before us. You know, some of them you could be forgiven for thinking there wasn't much joy, but I saw some of this. We couldn't quite decide if it was this way or this way, could we? I wasn't present for the entire Beckman, but I was around enough to know that the kids did find joy there. Swimming and looking for rocks and leaves, whatever they could find on the beach. I was there enough to be deeply grateful for the work that Kim and Noelle and Nancy put into it. And after all this, I want to say very simply that as much as anything, the work of the church, that the baton that we have been handed in the relay, is to instill in those children a sense of their inner and outer dignity, the beauty and their worth. The work that we have been given, the race that we run, is to teach our children of God's love for them, and the need to demonstrate that love to the others who need to hear it. We go about that work with the full weight of our ancestors behind us, the full 170 years, people who have populated St. Paul's, cheering us on. We go about it with the example of Jesus before us, demonstrating the love that is possible at the end toward which we race. Amen.